In this video, we're going to talk about how to do scientific unit conversions and solving problems, such as word problems that involve conversions. So the first type we're going to tackle are going from one metric unit to another. And in your textbook on page 529, there is a common units of measurement conversion chart. And we're going to start with something measured in grams, and we're going to go to kilograms. So I've copied down a problem here, and I've also copied down a relevant unit conversion factor for you. So over here, we have our problem, 85 grams, and we want to know how many kilograms that is. We know that 1 kilogram is 1,000 grams. So there are a few ways you could go about solving this type of problem. One of the ways you may have been taught to do this in a previous class is simply moving the decimal point. So in this case, we're going from a smaller unit to a larger one, which means that when we move our decimal point, we need to make sure that our answer becomes a number smaller than our original measurement in grams. So when you're doing that, that means that you're going to move the decimal point towards the front of the number. If you went the other way, that would make it larger, which is what you would do if you were going the other direction. So when we go from grams to kilograms, we want a smaller number. So we're going to move that decimal point from here behind the 8.5, and we're going to move it 1, 2, 3 places. So we will go 1, 2, 3 places. We'll put in a 0 there to fill it in. We'll make that a decimal point. So then that gives us 0.085 kilograms as our answer. Remember that you always need the unit. Myself out of the way here so I have more room to write. There's another way you might have been taught how to do this, and you might have been taught that you need to divide by 1,000 in order to get that answer. So how would you know that? Well, if one kilogram is the same thing as 1,000 grams, you can write it like this, and that's the same thing as this, which is the same thing as a number divided by itself, which is always 1. So, since we know that you can always multiply any number by 1 and get the same number, we can have 85 grams, and we're going to multiply that by the version of this factor over here that has grams in the bottom so that the grams will cancel out. And we're going to do 1 kg over 1,000 g. Grams will cancel out, and you get 85 times 1, which is 85. Answer will be in kilograms, as we would like it to be, and you divide that by 1,000. And then you can either put that into your calculator, or move the decimal place, or do long division, or leave it as a fraction. No matter how you put it, 85 over 1,000 is the same thing as 85 thousandths, which is also the same thing as 0.85, which we got the other way of solving it, and your answer is in the correct units. So another type of problem we might do is to have to convert from US customary to metric, or perhaps the other way. Perhaps you will have to measure something in lab, and you have a common desk ruler, the kind with feet and inches, and that's all you can use to measure something. But to be scientifically accurate, you want to report your lab report in meters, centimeters, millimeters, in order to be following lab protocols. So how do you do that? Well, you'd need some conversion factors. So let's say we're going to convert 5 feet into both inches and centimeters. I move myself out of the road here. We know that 1 inch is approximately 2.5 centimeters. 2.5 is 1/2, or 2 but 1/2. 1 foot is 12 inches. So if we have 5 feet, how many inches is that? Well, we take 5 feet times, and remember we can multiply by anything that equals 1 because it's a number over itself. So we could put 1 foot down here, and we can put 12 inches up here. So now we have 5 times 12 inches, because feet canceled out and anything over 1 is still 1. So that is 60 inches. Inches to centimeters, we're going to repeat that process. We've got 60 inches over here. We want to multiply by something that equals 1 and gets rid of inches. So we put inches down here, and 1 inch is 2.5 centimeters. You just multiply 60 times 2.5. And I don't have that one memorized, so let's just do it on pencil and paper here. 60 times 1/2 is the same thing as divided by 2. And that's 30, and 60 times 2 is 120. And then we're just going to add those two together to get 150. So it's 150 centimeters. So the first part of our question was 5 feet. Equals how many inches? 60. And how many centimeters is that? 150 centimeters. The next type of problem would involve converting temperatures. So quite often in the United States, we're used to temperatures measured in Fahrenheit. That's how we report our weather. That's how we bake in our ovens. But let's say you've got a recipe that your friend from Canada gave you, and they've got everything, all the oven temperatures listed in Celsius. Now what do you do? Well, that's easy. There are some formulas you can use to convert any temperature from Celsius to Fahrenheit and back. So these are printed in your book. You can find these online. You can also find these on Google Calculator. If you have not tried that service, I highly recommend it. But the basic formula to go from Celsius to Fahrenheit is you get your temperature in Celsius, and you get your 9/5, and you multiply the two together, and then you add 32. The reason for this is that a Celsius degree and a Fahrenheit degree are not the same size. One is 9/5 as big as the other. And also, the freezing point of water in Celsius is 0, but in Fahrenheit it's 32. So you have to adjust for both the size of the unit and where the units start. Now, if you want to go backwards from Fahrenheit to Celsius, instead of adding 32 last, we're going to subtract 32 first, and then we're going to multiply by not 9/5, but we're going to flip it, and it's 5/9. One of the things I do on campus is I use an autoclave to sterilize things. And the door, for safety reasons, on that autoclave will not open until the internal temperature is 85 degrees, because the autoclave gets so hot that it's past the boiling point of water using steam pressure to sterilize things. So if I want to know
whether I should use some oven mitts when I am reaching into that autoclave as soon as I open the door. I could convert the temperatures and figure out whether I could actually touch something that hot with my bare hand and expect not to get burnt. So if I know that it opens at 80 degrees Celsius, and I want to know what that is in Fahrenheit, I'm going to use this formula here. So I'm going to go down a little bit. 80 times 9/5. And then I'm going to add 32 to that. And if I put that into a calculator, I'm going to end up with 176 Fahrenheit. There is no way I could touch something that hot and not get burnt without using an oven mitt. That'd be like grabbing a sheet of cookies right out of the oven with your bare hand. So another interesting thing that you'll see sometimes is nutrition facts on food. We often give our serving sizes in the units that people are used to dealing with in their everyday life, like cups, ounces. It's going to mostly be US customary units for the serving sizes. However, the nutrition facts, they always give you the number of grams of fat, grams of protein, grams of carbohydrates. So that's kind of an interesting place where you're using both systems of measurement at once. So one that's always very confusing to people is the anomaly of 2% milk. 2% of what? 2% of that milk is fat. The remaining 98% of it is going to be everything else that's in the milk. So that's going to be the carbohydrates, the proteins, and lots of water, because milk is mostly water. Whole milk is 3.25% fat on average. It kind of depends on the cow. Or if you're not talking about cow milk, it'll be something completely different. So if we know that whole milk is 3.25% fat and one serving of milk is 1 cup, and that 1 cup of whole milk has 8 grams of fat, and you decide that's more fat than I want to consume in this particular meal, so I'm going to reach for the 2% instead of the whole milk. So you might be wondering how many grams of fat that would be in that serving of 1 cup size. Well, we can figure that out now. Now this one is a little more complicated because we have to use a proportion here. So what we're going to do is put 3.25, that's the percentage of whole milk, and we're going to divide that by 2%, because that's the percent of milk fat of the milk you're now going to drink. And that proportion is going to be equal to 8 grams of fat over the number we're trying to find. I put a cursive X here for that number. So we can cross multiply these things in order to figure out the answer. So if I multiply the 3.25 times X, and then I multiply eight times 2, that's going to give me 16 over 3.25. So I can put that into a calculator. And what that's going to give me is 4.9 grams of fat in 1 cup of 2% milk. The last one that we're going to do, this comes up in my house all the time because I have a Keurig at home. So I use the little brew basket and I just put 1 tablespoon in it for every cup of coffee I want to make. But when my family comes over, I need to make coffee for everybody. So I pull out the 12-cup pot of coffee and then I scratch my head and say, oh man, how many scoops of coffee do I need to put in here? And to make matters more complicated, of course, I don't use a tablespoon measuring spoon. I have a big old scoop that's 2 tablespoons worth. So how many scoops of coffee do I need to use if I'm making coffee for my whole family? Well, we know that we need to fill a 12-cup pot and that I usually use a tablespoon of coffee for every cup of coffee I'm making. And my scoop size is 2 tablespoons. So we've got 12 cups, and we're going to multiply by 1 cup on the bottom so that the cups will go away. And then we've got 1 tablespoon per cup. So that means that I need a total volume of 12 tablespoons of coffee. But remember, I'm not using a tablespoon. I'm using a big scoop that is 2 tablespoons. So now I need to multiply that by another conversion factor, 12 tablespoons. Let me get out of my own way here. 12 tablespoons times 2 tablespoons on the bottom per scoop. And that's 1 scoop. So tablespoons goes away. The 1 goes away because when you multiply by 1, it's the same thing as the number. 12 over 2, which is 6 scoops. Next time I'm going to be really smart and write that on a piece of tape and stick it to the back of the coffee pot. So that's it for our examples, and you should be ready to try all of the ones in the quiz. And if you don't get them right, work through them again. You can take the quiz as many times as you want to.